So then we are back with more understandings from the time of the second tabernacle services, where we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end. Then per the prophet Yirmiyahu, we find then a layer of understanding in the 61st chapter, where then we find areas related with the spring feast, related also with the mentioning of the autumn feast known as vengeance, and also explains the returning of the holy cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries. So then, understandably, these days then where the world is transitioning itself very rapidly from a system that was archaic and based on gambling of economies, gambling of banks, and then it's coming a very steady system where then the Creator very wisely then provides thousands upon thousands of jobs for people around the world, because the Creator knew during the time of the seed of 1,000 years, from 1009 to 2009, then the inhabitants of the earth would make bad decisions and cause then the financial ruin of mostly any country. So then let's understand then what's coming up, because it's very important explaining, so then people who are not having then enough knowledge of computers can start then familiarizing themselves, and then how they can get in those sites they can give them the most. This means not being part of any system that banks then can be part of it and then ruin you. There are systems then that does not use any regulation of government, yet very safe and very safe using it. So let's then understand firstly from the instructions from the scripture, where then Daniel the prophet, he mentioned then after the people would go to and fro, this is Daniel 12, meaning the time of the seat, no holy cities, from 1009 to 2009, and at the end of this period then would have increase of knowledge. Daniel was a tradesperson. He was a person doing direct trade, so then he was working for a couple of kings. So then let's understand what these then goes on during the time of the life of Daniel. He worked for these areas for many years and gave us then the understanding of the Gentile level. So then during the time he was working then for king of Babylon, then the Middle Persians, Cyrus, then we find these very important, because most of these understandings of the scripture came from these two periods. Let's then understand during this section the importance of pointing out the direct trade system. Some time ago there were some equipment sent to space from China. As we understand, China has the largest media system in the world. So then equipment was set up in space, in orbit, regarding then television, for instance, besides other tasks. Shortly after, some 10 days ago, it was launched another equipment. Obviously, one of them is related with the signal. So then, understandably, when Daniel was explaining the high knowledge, and knowledge would increase for the purposes of trade, we must understand then Daniel the 11th chapter, and a couple of chapters later when you find there in Apocrypha, then you find the understanding or the layer of understanding of the dragon and Baal. Baal is the Babylonian system. Babylonian system is then any other where we can understand is against the Asia market. But let's understand from the viewpoint of the instructions. Of those that are not from tabernacling, obviously would come from at some source Babylonian system. But then to make it very strikingly very clear, we find then the dragon, the Chinese system of the East, preparing then this system of the end, where then not only is included then those nations of the Asia market, but then the entire world. And this system is coming. Obviously, we find then many areas where we can be part of it and exclude ourselves from these absolutely deteriorating banking system that made a gamble out of the nations of the world. So they understand when the system becomes available, the first situation the banks are going to experience is then the wiping out of the savings. They're going to invest their money elsewhere, direct trade. So then we find ourselves during this time understanding these section by section by section, where then people can be re-educated on how to use a system without the danger of governments and their gambling acts being then playing with your own money. Because bankers, when they invest their money, is a sort of a game, it's a gamble. That's why when you invest your money in bank, you get a very insignificant share, because the bank has to take the risk when they gamble with your money. During this new system, it's always positive, and you can invest and you can receive from the same system. And there are other systems using then banking, for instance, sort of a bank, but is not linked up with the regulations of governments and banks. And some of them are independent, giving you 100% then the liberty to do your own trade. So extremely important during these times, because as we understand, as the world then is shifting, we understand then our country is in trouble, and then we are in trouble also with the Soviet Union. We send spies over there. Israel is doing very badly. They are invading somebody else's country. They are going against the international laws, and they are going to be pushed back because they are acting evil. They are destroying their own brothers. As we understand in Ezekiel the 37th chapter, the sticks of authority is not from Ephraim or Judah, and then those north and south nations of Israel. It has nothing to do with it. What does have to do is then the couple of anointings of Ibrahim, the first son and the second son. The 62nd chapter relates with a very specific understanding of the Ishmaelites. The Ishmaelites, they use turbans, restoring the beauty of trade. This is what it means. So then during this time, where then we are obviously observing so many changes taking place at the same time, people can prepare themselves and invest their funding. For instance, Bitcoin is a system that does not use regulations of banks. Extremely safe. It is a very simple system. And then the best system ever for those people living on islands distant, for instance in the Pacific, where they have natural resources or gold or some sort of exchange. It is incredibly simple and extremely viable for them to have these systems in their computers, where they can get a signal from space, they can get a generator, and they can log on, and then they exchange their mineral resources such as gold, and then the boaters can come at night and do a gold exchange. They get the gold from the mines, they visit with the boater at night, and they can make a direct transfer from the value of gold into their bitcoins directly in their system, and they can spend whatever they want. It is extremely organized, and it is amazing. The Creator has then provided thousands upon thousands upon thousands of jobs at once. When the system becomes available, it's going to be extremely exciting. That's why then we understand when the Messiah said later in the future he saw ships everywhere and the freighters of the earth. He was explaining this in the 8th chapter of Revelation. Then 10 chapters later he explained again. Freighters. He saw freighters everywhere, because people were then coming out of the banking, gambling system, where then people from slaves. It's a slavery system. That's why then these nations also is enslaved with a system that never works, into the new system where then we understand the trade of the end. Extremely important. Because thus far we have very shortly 36 months to get taxation and labeling. Regarding governments, there is no way of tracking these new systems. Absolutely no way. So then when the system becomes available of China, there is a way of doing outside of the banking regulations, yet valid, using it and purchasing with. Since governments, they have no control over it, imagine when the people start purchasing via this system and they want their parcels untaxed. So then rather than our US government working in our taxation and freighting, what our government is doing then, mixing up itself with wars and drones and junk, mixing up with Israel is an absolutely cursed country. They are provoking wars. They are sending so many of these junky people over there, these mercenaries, and they provoke wars. This is what they do. Because Israel has not found its place yet. They should have an absolutely straight relationship of Israel and Northern Sudan. That's where the great prophet said the first holy city would be at. And the rest of it would have then the kingdom of the north, the Soviet Union. Then obviously adjusting their system and then adopting the Chinese form of socialism. And then protecting those people doing direct trade with China. So then at some point we are going to find then the military of China and the military of the Soviet Union uniting themselves and protecting those nations doing direct trade with China. Extremely important. That's where we find then at some point in the 11th chapter of Daniel, and the former state of the Soviet Union was such, and then the later status of the Soviet Union would become higher than the first. Then you understand what it means. And then Africa, as we understand, CMC company from China is making their move. Since last Sunday we found then 7 deals closed with Asian markets or then countries, backing up the Chinese system with raw materials, plus on Africa, backing up even further the raw materials. You find then the system of the East being protected everywhere. So when the people they log on, they have the liberty to do whatever they want, without any kind of regulation of the banking system, because it's a true gamble. These liars and these scoundrels, they have ruined our country. So then with this in mind, it's extremely important also understanding these drones, junkies. We think we have the right to destroy. For instance, there are some of these strikes that are so extremely evil. Sometimes relationship ceremonies, couple of people, holy matrimony, and sometimes we strike them with bombs for no reason. But it doesn't get in the media, does it? You know what this means? Murder. This country is absolutely out of control. Israel is out of control. They are invading other countries outside of the international laws. We invaded Iraq, saying that they have big weapons over there of large destruction. They have nuclear weapons. We never found it. So we are going over the international laws, and then Israel is going over the international laws, and both of these countries must be pushed back. Israel must return to its place, have a direct relationship with Sudan. That's what the great prophet said. The land of Cush and the returning of the holy cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries. The United States must retrieve and rebuild and regain credibility. And these can be only achieved if we hire then or we vote for a lady as president. because man has lost respect. So don't be surprised if the next president then is Michel. Don't be surprised the least, because it would be another form of evaluation of our country. Then the nations would regard our nation with a very distinct leadership, giving another load of trust. So then the system then is coming very fastly. We find then obviously these not regulated ways of paying, ways of sending money, ways of make payment, and there is no link with any government or any banking regulation, and absolutely 100% legal. Gives you then the first understanding of the finances of the new system when it comes available. And very shortly, because our own subsystem of the US system is then ruining, as it was predicted by IMF, and our system is not improving. We are printing out more money. This is criminal. We understand printing out more money than should have is criminal. And a whole lot more coming up. And besides this, very interestingly, we find then also in Yeshayahu the prophet, then even the Creator himself is speaking of the holy cities and gathering the nations. Those nations are then the Ishmaelites' kings. There is a layer of understanding in Yeshayahu where you find then the Creator himself during the time of the restoration period speaking of the testifiers. Those testifiers are the same as in Galah or Revelation, the 6th chapter. You have to understand how that layer, but even in Yeshayahu the prophet, he found a layer of time over there where these people would be testifying of the Messiah and then inviting the nations, not to set apart. The Hebrews in the holy cities, their objective is going to Jerusalem and doing the pruning, as per Zechariah. And the testifiers, those Gentiles who are saved in the Messiah and they understand tabernacling, those are be going around and then inviting the kings of the Ishmaelites for questionings at their own convenience. So very interesting layer of understanding, but Yeshayahu the prophet did record